Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I suggest a new rule to the NFL. Don't overreact to the point where now we're wondering whether or not the refs and the quarterbacks are too soft. You had last week when we recorded and we talked about Tua's injury and how Tua was knocked out twice, probably. And now we're talking about how the refs are being too nice to the quarterbacks. At some point, they do have to pick a lane, right?
Yeah, it is a very unusual concurrent set of complaints that people have. There's a clear middle ground that doesn't require that you call every safety thing a sign of the NFL softness, right? I'm not a centrist normally, but I feel like you could probably take the middle one here.
Well, so I missed the first part of the game, and when I turned it on, I turned it on for the hit. And I was like, why is my phone exploding? And Hulu's a couple of seconds behind, and then that happened, and well, what the hell it wasn't as bad as the Brady one, I thought. And it happened in a fairly know-nothing game, but it was still bad. But the Brady one I felt like was far worse, far more egregious.
So I think from the way that it looks and feels, I think the Brady one, the Grady Jarrett sack of Brady, it felt like a worse call, and it is it was one of the worst calls I've ever seen. So I don't want to downplay it. It was worse than the intentional grounding that was called on Teddy, right? It was a worse call. But this one, I think by the letter of the rule is an even worse call, even though it doesn't look as bad as the Brady one, because Chris Jones was actually bracing to prevent all of his body weight from falling onto the quarterback, which is literally in the text of the rule. So that's from that perspective, this is actually an even more egregious usage of the rule. Either way, both of those should just be sacks. Well, this one should be a sack fumble, right? What an impressive play. But both of them should have just been just play ball, right? Should have just let that happen.
Ben Gessling had sent a tweet out that was referencing a conversation with Harrison Smith. And Harrison Smith had said, as defensive players, we're not resistant to these rule changes. They just need to be physically possible, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. The change that, prevents you from lowering your helmet into the crown of another helmet. A lot of defensive players were like, all right, we got to change our tackling technique. That's fine. Right. Some of them were like, well, please account for offensive players lowering their helmet, which is fair. And refs have actually not done a very great job of accounting for that, even though they did explicitly have the Adrian Peterson rule to prevent that thing from happening. But yeah, okay, so that's all fair, right? But when it comes to penalties that require an impossible change of momentum in order for something to occur, it's just absolutely wild behavior, I think, from the NFL Rules Committee.
Yeah, just a bit ridiculous. I do enjoy that the conversation is completely flipped between how does a team put Tua out there? Quarterbacks need to be protected and all this too. Yeah. Oh God, this is not okay. This is not what we wanted at all.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, you don't even have to penalize. This is not a penalty issue, right? Because you don't have to penalize those hits. And also the rules should take players out of games who are clearly suffering from neurological. This is no one has to be penalized, right?
we can all agree that both of these things, as a nation, there's not a lot we can agree on as people.
Just come together like we do after great tragedies, and as a nation all agree that rule sucks.
We can all agree that Tom Brady didn't need that much protection, and we're fine with the idea with Tom Brady getting hit. Can we all just...
we all agree, yeah.
I'm just trying to find some common ground. I'm just trying here. All right, well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to review. The Vikings were successful against the Bears. That was in doubt for just a little bit, but the Vikings were successful, so we'll have all sorts of things to talk about as far as that game is concerned, and of course the mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like bonus material or access to the Discord where we hang out, and this weekend we're talking about the James Madison game for hours, go ahead and check us out over at patreon.com/NorseCode, and you can be one of the cool people over there who give either $3.50 a month to get access to material, or you can give $37.81 for a full year, which is cheaper than doing it month to month, and you can be cool over there. So Colin Scott, you just signed up. I just got the notification. Thank you, Colin, for signing up over on Patreon. So, patreon.com.
And as we were recording, what timing?
Yeah, right? Fantastic. So, thank you, Colin. Thank you so much. Also, you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to do a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up your Norse Code merchandise. If you want cups, baby onesies, shirts, throw pillows, there's options. There's even a shower curtain in case you're feeling froggy. So check that out over at norsecode.threadless.com. And let's get into the review of the Bears game. And I've said before on the show that it's a tale of two halves. In the first half, they were fantastic. Second half, they were terrible. The big difference between this year and last year seems to be that the Vikings are winning these games instead of losing them.
Yeah, which I think most of us would agree, as we continue the theme of community consensus, is a good thing, right? Obviously, not everybody who listens to this podcast is a Vikings fan. Don't understand you people, by the way.
Some are just plain James Madison people, and we'll get to the breakdown of that later in the mailbag.
Yeah, for sure. Stick around. We love you. But the only people who listen to the show that we love. Thank you for signing up for the Patreon. Yeah, so it is a good thing that the Vikings were able to kind of close out these games. Led to a discussion that a couple of us had on the Minnesota football party about, whether or not Kirk Cousins is clutch. I encourage you to kind of listen to that about like, hey, now that he's like leading the league in fourth quarter comebacks, weird, right? Is Kirk Cousins clutch? And, I don't know, but listen to that discussion for kind of a more in-depth discussion of that. But yeah, I mean, the Vikings have not played a complete game of football. What's kind of interesting is that I was reading about the Packers, who lost to the Giants, update, in London, no less.
Can you imagine going to London from the Midwest and watching your team lose? Like, I'd rather stay home.
Yeah, no, it would be absolutely brutal to travel all the way to London. Long flight, by the way. And then you're there for one essential reason. Maybe you do some other stuff on the side. You're there for one essential reason, and then you watch your team lose. I can't imagine that.
That is just unfortunate. Why would you do
but yeah, so after the game, LaFleur said, we have yet to play a complete game. It's always, one half is good, one half is not as good. And I was thinking, that sounds pretty familiar. Except the Vikings are 4-1, right? That's a pretty big difference there. But yeah, I mean, if the Vikings find a way to kind of tighten up, obviously they'll turn into a very good team. But inconsistency is kind of embedded in the way the team is constructed right now. So it's kind of hard to get around that too.
It's weird. Like, it seems like there's a lot of potential for this team to really go off and really be successful. Especially, you watch the first 26 minutes of the game, and this is a team that could, on paper, it looked like could destroy anybody, any defense in the league. All that we had was Justin Jefferson being used properly. You had Dalvin Cook all over the place. You had Jalen Reagor in for a touchdown. You had Kirk Cousins not only having a career day for him for pass completions to start off a game, he set a Vikings record.
Yeah, for consecutive pass completions. Yeah. Nate Tice said on the Athletic Football Show that the Vikings are like a stand-up comic that has a really tight five. Just a really great, 5-minute set. But when asked to do a special, just has nothing, right? and that's, I can't get that out of my brain. That's really good. The whole point of the Athletic Football Show is that Nate Tice reaches for comparisons. But that one is really good because there's like a good chunk of football that the Vikings play, right? They started off the game, like you said, 3 consecutive drives, 3 consecutive touchdowns, right? Like they were clearly pumping, right, on all cylinders. But when that when like push comes to shove, and you ask the Vikings to have a complete game, and mind you, they missed a couple of field goals. I think that's more on the offense than it is on the kicker because they're both 50+ field goals. But you kind of get, you kind of feel like, hey, you make one of those field goals, the game's not as close. You make both of those field goals, the game feels like it's continuing to have, the momentum, right? If it's real, the momentum that we feel like it should have. But you have 3 consecutive touchdowns, then you punt, miss field goal, interception, and then you finish the game with that touchdown. It feels like that shouldn't have been necessary at all. By the way, that last touchdown drive was 7 minutes, so beautiful working of the clock there. Something you don't get to say a lot about the Vikings.
It was like, this was a game that I realize it sounds like I'm complaining. There's been a lot of that this year. This was good. The Vikings offense looked good. The Vikings defense looked good. They're going against a team that, despite the fact that they're terrible, is spry. They have moments where they shine. Justin Fields looked good and was bailed out by his receivers a couple times. He looked good on occasion. This was, on paper, this should have been open and shut. This was done. This was the Vikings walking into US Bank Stadium, shoving the ball down the Bears' throat 3 times in a row and going, all right, we're good. We got reservations for Manny's. Is that what we're doing afterwards?
Right. Yeah. Any kind of preview, including the one that we did with Lauren Cox, kind of set up the idea that this was supposed to be a dominant victory for the Vikings. Right. And the Vikings ended up, I guess they didn't beat the spread, right? Because it finished at 7.5, but they ended up basically matching the Vegas prediction, which is a 7-point, but it didn't kind of play out like that, right? Like the Vikings let them back in. They made it a tie game before the Vikings could, score the final touchdown. And any kind of preview that you consumed, whether it was on TV, listened on a podcast, listened on radio, read, really kind of pointed out the huge talent or performance mismatches at basically every position, right? I mean, like, even though the Bears have like some really good players at some positions, like say running back, the Vikings have better players at those same positions. So it was difficult to find an area where the Bears were ahead in the matchup, and yet the Vikings were kind of duking it out in a close game against a team that shouldn't have been in the same conversation as the Vikings. And I'm a person that thinks the Vikings, their record overstates their quality. I think that they're functionally an average team. And I still think, the Bears are so poor, right, as a team, that it shouldn't have been as close as it was. And so I think that there's a reason to complain. The Vikings are now 3-1 in moral losses, I think. I think that it's getting to the point where it's nice that, the Vikings are able to find correctable mistakes while they win. But in order for that to be a positive, they need to correct those mistakes. I mean, I feel like we've seen teams time and again go up early in the season, get called unsustainable, get people mad at them for get people mad at commentators for calling that unsustainable. And then that team sustain a string of losses, right? And Vikings fans know this probably better than anyone because they went 5-0 in 2016, right? And that was driven by an unsustainable offensive defensive paradigm. The defense at some points during that season was outscoring the offense. And I believe they had a defensive score in all 5 of those games, if I remember correctly. They go 5-0. That offense was so bad that they, quote unquote, allow Norv Turner to resign. I guess they don't fire him technically. And they bring in a much better offense, but by that point, the defense had stopped scoring. And so they started losing games. I think they finished that season 8-8. Certainly it was no fun. We see this every year. There's always a team that goes up early in the season and then collapses down the stretch. Sometimes it's injury related. Sometimes it's regression coming back to bite them. And the goal for the Vikings should be to not be that team right now. The Bears game is just such a good indication. And you said a couple of times that, hey, Justin Fields looked all right. Sometimes he was bailed out by receivers, but there were other times when the Vikings were bailed out by the receivers, right? Because there were a couple of critical drops that Bears receivers made. I can remember 2 of them that were big plays, one of them on 3rd and 7, that Bears receivers should have made where the receiver was wide open. Justin Fields hit them perfectly in stride, and they didn't make it, right? And so the Vikings got lucky. They were able to force a punt, right? Or they were able to prevent a big play. And that should not be where you're at when, like, the Bears think that, like, the guy the Vikings cut at receiver is worth a ton of snaps, right? Like, Amir Smith-Marset nearly changed the game for them, right? Like, that's an embarrassing situation. Because if the Vikings had traded Amir Smith-Marset to the Bears, that'd be one thing, right? All parties agree that he is value and that the Vikings don't want to let him go. But they cut him, right? That's different. And so, like, that being the case, a receiver group composed of players like that should not be the ones that are nearly taking the Vikings to the woodshed. These teams should be on different tiers, and it's really disappointing that they're not. Again, the Vikings won. I have a really negative tone, but the reason is, and it's actually not related to Kirk Cousins, who mostly played extremely well, right? And I say mostly because, he did, have some mistakes late in the game, but it's hard to go 19 completions in a row and be bad, right? But just because this team is really worrisome, it should be better. It's not that I'm upset at the results so far. It's that I'm concerned about the results to come and the warning signs that have popped up in this game. Like the Saints game, they're up against a backup quarterback, a backup receiver, a backup left guard, a backup running back, a backup safety, and they nearly lost, right? It's like the same situation where they're given kind of all these opportunities. They're playing against a quarterback who has no support, who himself is not playing that well, and he ends up with the highest yards per attempt he's had all season, right? With, I think, 9.9, right? He could have had a higher yards per attempt if it wasn't for mistakes that they made, not the Vikings. And the Vikings needed a last-minute drive or a last-quarter drive to pull out a win in the game. And so the team is concerning. They know it, right? They understand that they are not playing, quote unquote, like a 4-1 team. If you ask them, they won't say that, but they keep on saying after games like, hey, we're in a really good spot where we have a couple of wins behind our back, but we know what we need to correct, right? So they very clearly understand they're making a lot of mistakes and getting away with it, right? But that's only part of the equation, right? You have to fix those mistakes. And so far, the Vikings seemingly have not, which is why so many questions in our mailbag are negatively toned, right? Because they're like, hey, what is going on here? And I think that's appropriate, right? Because this is like, when the Vikings almost lost to the 0-16 Lions. Like, this should not be happening. Like, you should be outclassing this kind of team. Like, all games in the NFL are close, quote unquote, but like, this should not be happening.
Well, even speaking of the Lions got blanked by the Patriots this weekend.
That's right. Yeah, they got destroyed. Well, I mean, Matt Patricia knew all the secrets, right? That must have been it.
Being 2 years out, he still knew where all the bodies were buried.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Almost none of the same players. He's I know what's up.
He wrote them all down with that pencil behind his ear, and that was...
That's why he keeps it. Yeah.
Well, instead of starting with the offense, I want to start with the defense, because this is... Everyone walked away thinking, wow, we were lucky to be able to get the W on this. Let's talk about the defense. For the first nearly 2 quarters, defense looked good. Defense looked fine. Then everything kind of broke Chicago's way.
Yeah, I mean, they gave up 34 yards at the most until that final drive in the final 2 minutes, or I guess it was a 1 minute long drive, but in the final 2 minutes of the first half, which sounds fairly familiar, they gave up a 34-yard drive. That was the most they gave up. Then it was a negative 5-yard drive, and then a 15-yard drive. Like, just really excellent stuff. A lot of that has to do with, first of all, Cameron Dancer just played a really excellent game. Obviously, he kept it off really well. A lot of that has to do with, how well players like Harrison Phillips were playing, players like Dalvin Tomlinson were playing. The interior was doing a really good job, not just stopping the run, but generating a good amount of pressure. We saw some pretty good play from Harrison Smith early in the game. We saw some pretty good play from Zadarius Smith and Daniil Hunter, who didn't always show up throughout the course of the whole game. But early on, they were able to generate pressure in that first quarter, force Justin Fields off his spot, which is kind of normal considering the state of play for the Bears, and force some throwaways, force some errant throws, break up some passes. Like, they were doing pretty well, both stopping the run and creating impossible throwing angles and lanes for the quarterback. And so that early performance, I think, is what the Vikings were, they were supposed to be doing, right? And this was a team that, like, hey, maybe this is a team that's kind of figured it out. They went like 3 games in a row without allowing second half points or allowing very few second half points. And then the final 2 minutes of this half, they give up a touchdown. The opening drive of the next half, they give up a touchdown, and they give up 2 more field goals, and now the Bears are back in it. So, and like honestly, like how lucky was that fumble, right? That they forced at the end. Like great job by Cameron Dancer. I'm not calling that necessarily luck, but it was, it could have gone like out of bounds. It was so close. I mean, it didn't like bounce out, but had he not held on to it, right? If it had just dropped, it probably would have gone out of bounds. And so, that is asking for a lot, right? And we saw breakdowns where players like Patrick Peterson were out of sorts. We saw Chandon Sullivan get beaten a little bit. We saw Cameron Bynum out of position, which like the whole point of Cameron Bynum is that he's in position, right? Ross Blacklock had a pretty poor game. That's rough, right? And a lot of the backup defensive linemen, not DJ Wanham, good job, but not a lot of the backup defensive linemen ended up having a pretty poor game, which is, I think, part of the problem too. As you rely on them more, you end up being able to generate less because there's just no depth on that unit.
I forget if it was last episode or the episode before where there was a mailbag question about cornerbacks. And the question was, would you like to have a fast one that makes a bunch of mistakes or a slow one that's well-rounded? And I think Patrick Peterson has become that slow one. Like he's out there. He's what the wide receiver doesn't know, he knows and is able to to defend it. But if you're going in a foot race with him, he's gonna be lost.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. But like the thing is, if you had like a good defensive design, you can build around that, and the Vikings seemingly don't have a good defensive design. So, that's part of it is that you've got limitations, and those limitations are showing up. But also, you need to really build around those limitations.
It was funny. Like I was watching him play, and I'm like, I know he's better than like everyone else that's a corner on the roster. I just don't feel comfortable at all with him going after a number 1 receiver right now. Like, absolutely not.
Right, exactly.
I see him fall or get burned more often than any other corner that we have right now. And like he makes plays and everything, but like you saw Harrison Smith out in coverage too. It's like, I'm just tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of all this winning, Arif. Are you tired of all this winning? Tired of all this type of winning. How about that? So
yeah, there you go.
The pass rush, what happened to it?
The pressure never appeared right away. Like I think if we took a look at like ESPN's pass rush win rate, we'd see a very low pass rush win rate. And so the performance of the Vikings players to create pressure was not there, right? I mean, we saw, some kind of instant wins from, Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson. We saw less so with players like like the edge rushers, Darius Smith, Daniel Hunter, less so with Patrick Jones or any of the backup like Ross Blacklock or James Lynch. And so they didn't like win off the snap. They didn't generate much pressure of their own accord. And you're always in a bad spot, right? When like your 2 nose tackles are generating more pass rush wins than your edge rushers or anybody else on the team. Like you've got basically 2 options, right? When your nose tackles are out producing your edge rushers, it's either, you've got Kenny Clark or you've got a bad situation. The Vikings do not roster, as far as I know, Kenny Clark. So they've got a bad situation. The thing is, Justin Fields holds onto the ball so long, and that offensive line is so untalented that the Vikings were kind of inevitably going to create pressure. Now, if you take a look at pressure rate across teams, the third most pressured quarterback in the NFL is Justin Fields. Number 4 is Trey Lance. We're not going to see him for the rest of the season, so he's going to drop out once they increase the minimums. That's probably also true for number 1, Teddy Bridgewater, who I'm going to guess is playing next week against the Vikings because he doesn't have a concussion. He's just in the concussion protocol. So he's probably going to play depending on how the NFL and the Dolphins handle Tua. We'll talk to a Dolphins guy next week to get more on that. But long term, we're probably not going to see Teddy. So he's probably going to drop out of the rankings. So of players that have started, more than 2 games this year, Justin Fields ranks number 2 in pressure rate. Again, product of the offensive line, product of how long he holds onto the ball. Now, he held onto the ball a lot against the Vikings, which is why he basically had the same pressure rate in this game, and he was pretty poor under pressure. In fact, he threw a bunch of turnover-worthy plays. Not just like as a whole, that's just kind of who he is as a player. Like under pressure, he'll just throw turnover-worthy plays. But he threw a bunch of turnover-worthy plays, specifically under pressure, and specifically when the Vikings blitz, which they don't blitz very often. So we have like on plays that he was pressured, he held onto the ball for 3.92 seconds, which in the NFL is an eternity. So that's what happened, but the Vikings did not play well to produce that result. That's just who he is as a player. If they're able to generate pressure faster, right? If they were able to beat, this pair of 5th round offensive tackles, this backup left guard, this struggling center, if they were able to do that off of the snap, right? Then, Justin Fields would have been under pressure like 60% of the time in this game. It wouldn't have been close. And so we still need to have answers. Now, Ed Donatel says that Danielle Hunter is still basically adjusting to the switch of the 3-4 outside linebacker. And, he says that this is pretty normal. First of all, if that's the case, then, the inverse switch is probably true too, in which case the Vikings should have been a little bit more wary of doing that instant trade for Yannick Ngakoue. But more importantly, I think that there's a mechanical reason that this is true, which is that you change the lead foot with which you rush with. If you pay attention to the way that defensive line experts talk about, pass rushing from the defensive line, they'll talk a lot about how footwork and hand fighting technique need to be synced together in some way. Not that they, perform, identically, right? It's not that you chop at the same time you step, although with a cross chop, that is explicitly what you do, but rather that the timing works in such a way that one kind of leads into the other, and so that you can create the maximum amount of power or the maximum amount of speed or the maximum amount of deception that you need to be able to get past the opponent. It's kind of one of the most difficult elements of pass rushing is creating a rhythm as a pass rusher. That rhythm is built off of your burst off of the line of scrimmage. Now, if your inside foot is up, that means the first leg that you move is your outside foot, and it might mean that you take a little bit longer to make your first move. Now, it's vice versa. You need to be more diligent about making sure that the timing of your hand fighting technique is, because your hands are going to be closer, essentially, that your hand fighting technique is up to snuff. Otherwise, you're going to be running into the offensive tackle without having executed your move. If you don't have that figured out, then you're not going to be a very effective pass rusher right away. It's actually one of the things that makes Micah Parsons so interesting as a pass rusher is that as a stand-up rusher, he rushes with the quote-unquote wrong lead foot, but he has synced up his hand-fighting technique and his timing to deal with that. And so he's a remarkably effective edge rusher. Danielle Hunter needs to essentially basically learn how to do that, and maybe down the stretch this year, we'll be able to see some of that. But for now, we're not seeing some of the most effective players have effective plays as a result of it.
So let's talk about the offensive line. We're not at the offense really yet, but the offensive line's been good.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that fact.
Darisaw.
It is a fact.
Darisaw has been good.
Okay, Darisaw in particular has been excellent. Like, he might be, I don't know if I even should be using the word might. It feels like he's just playing better than Brian O'Neill, right? Like,
I think it's either PFF or somebody else has him ranked as the 3rd best in the game right now.
And the thing is, sometimes those grades kind of hide the kind of player that person is. It did that a little bit with Matt Khalil. A recontextualization of his rookie grade might have told us he was a little bit overrated grade-wise, but largely he played well. A really good example might be Darrell Williams for the Carolina Panthers. When he was there, he had a really high PFF grade, and the Panthers did not hold a lot of regard for him as a player, chose not to pay him a bunch even though he had a high PFF grade. The reasoning is because he would end up not giving up very much pressure at all because he had a ton of help. There's a lot of, you remember that was the Cam Newton Panthers. He had a lot of run blocking snaps to kind of hide his pass blocking, and teams were kind of over focused on that. Plus, there was a ton of play action in that offense, and that kind of helps too. Once you account for the difficulty of that kind of assignment, those grades kind of give you a different picture over what that player is. That's how what's happening with Darrisaw. First, at the beginning of the year, the Vikings were not doing that much play action, and he still was grading pretty high. But second, the Vikings are doing some pretty unusual stuff with him, like leaving him out on an island split further out when he is up against some of these really fast pass rushers. This does two things. One, it gives him a lot less help, but two, it gives him additional depth and additional time to deal with what fast pass rushers are able to do. That does create kind of an opening in the pass rush lanes, which the Vikings obviously have to accommodate for. But he is like on a literal island in a sense that very often players are not on the offensive line, and he's killing people. Like I think his pass block grade in this game was higher than his run block grade. I was more impressed with what he was doing as a run blocker because it looked like those assignments were so difficult, like the reach blocks all the way across the opposing 3 technique to open up a lane. Like that's insane stuff. But he was just an impressive player. I don't think he gave him any pressure. So he was a really high level player up against Robert Quinn is no slouch. Lauren Cox was right that Quinn is just not the same player when he gets attention than when he gets to play opposite somebody like Khalil Mack or play on the same line as somebody like Aaron Donald, right? But like, he got smothered in that game. In a very literal sense, too. You got some of the finishes, Darrisaw landed directly on him. But, like, he got blanked out by Darrisaw. Darrisaw had a great game. And we're seeing a really good game from... I thought Ezra Cleveland had an even better game than Christian Darrisaw. I know that he had a better offensive grade. But, like, just generally speaking, like, his pass blocking and his run blocking, absolutely wonderful stuff.
So, let's talk about the offense. Justin Jefferson feasted.
Mm-hmm.
Thielen
receiving and passing.
Oh, that was a hell of a pass. Say what you will about Justin Jefferson being this. I don't want to use the term generational wide receiver, but he's damn good at what he does. And it turned out that like on the numbers, he had that throw to Cook, and absolutely fooled everyone.
Yeah, that was really remarkable. Probably not going to have that same opportunity again for a while because people will be keying in on it. But, that was pretty good. But yeah, I mean, 40 yards in the first half. Great game in the first half. I mean, he played well, I would say, in the second half. But like,
yeah, there was a time in the first half that I thought, oh my God, Cousins is going to pull a Cutler and a Brandon Marshall here. Like we're just gonna do this. We're gonna get the most receptions by a wide receiver in a game. That's gonna be his goal. He walked into US Bank, decided I'm gonna choose violence. I'm gonna choose all of these routes to get Justin Jefferson 200 yards and 30 touches.
Who was it? Was it Devin Hester who's interviewed by Master Tesfatzian by Bleacher Report? That has that anecdote about Cutler and Bray. I'll link that in the show notes. It is exquisite stuff about the way Cutler would interact with all the receivers on the roster. So I don't want to spoil it. I'm going to let you all, but like, yes, absolutely. It definitely felt like that. And the thing is, like the Bears saw games where Justin Jefferson went off, right, against the Saints and the Packers, and games where Justin Jefferson was held up, right, like against the Eagles and the Lions. And they decided, hey, Saints did all right. Why not? Why not us?
It really did look like they were just going to try to, I'd say contain him, but just like hit him once at the line and then just see what happens.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, this guy has one of the best releases in the league. Again, a very funny fact, given that his final year at LSU, he only played in the slot and did not need to actually release against press. But he has one of the best releases in the league. And your solution is to take a backup corner. And maybe that's unfair to Kindle Vildor, but to take a backup corner and just press him all game and then just hope for the best, not even cheat a safety on top of him. Man, that's like it took a double team with the team's top corner and a safety to limit Justin Jefferson. And they're just taking like a corner. Maybe technically he's the top, but like the top corner wasn't even healthy for that game. They just took like a corner and were like, it's all on you, man. This is how much faith we have in you. Right? We believe in you.
Just amazing stuff from Justin Jefferson, and Cousins was just there just to feed him all day. It looked great. It was the sort of opening drive where you're like, oh, this is exactly why Kevin O'Connell is here. This is what he envisioned in the interview as to what they would do to start off games and just run up the score on people. ...
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It was reminiscent of what the Rams would be doing, in those like really exciting, like the 2018 season, or even some moments of the 2021 season, where it was just play after play after play after play. They would do one thing, then they would do another thing, and they do a third thing, they do a fourth thing, and then they do something that kind of looks like the first thing, but it's different enough that it caught them off guard. And it was just like play after play after play, just relentless. I mean, like 3 drives, touchdowns, right? A lot of it off of the back of Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins was playing remarkably well too, right? So like, I don't know, it was beautiful. More.
Yeah, we demand more of this. Actually, if we get a steady diet of this, I'd be totally fine with it. Dalvin Cook looked great. Had more than 100 yards. Was out there moving. A couple of touchdowns. Jalen, you know what? I don't want to talk about Cook yet. I want to talk about the Jalen Reagor touchdown, which is something that Vikings fans hadn't had a chance to say yet, and Eagles fans definitely didn't get a chance to say as often as they would like. But Reagor was out there, and Reagor made a move.
Yeah, I believe technically it was a receiving touchdown, right? It's one of those, like, you have to. It's by the rule of the game. It's technically a receiving touchdown because Cousins did touch the ball first.
Forward pass, and yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so he ends up making a move on was it this linebacker 54, I think. 58. Just a beautiful like shimmy, right? Just like it reminded me of, have you ever seen that high school highlight of Lamar Jackson? And I'm not really comparing the two. I'm just talking about these two moves. But that high school highlight of Lamar Jackson, where he just does a stop juke so hard, this guy flies out of the frame, possibly into the next county. And
he goes into the shadow realm. That's what happened to Roquan Smith.
Right. Yeah. And Reagor just like basically walks in after that. And Lamar Jackson, high schooler, just doing awful things to other high schoolers that really should not be allowed at a game where there's not money on the line. And Lamar Jackson would just like actually just walk in dainty, like just the most disrespect. Reagor did run it in after that, but that was just an incredible move. Incredible. That, which is like the whole idea behind Jalen Reagor was that he would be able to do stuff like that. So nice to see the Vikings be able to kind of utilize that. I'm not going to say they'll revive his career in the sense that, he's going to recover that first round status. But I mean, the fact that he is becoming a player that people like and people rely on, I think is really huge. And these are the reasons why the Vikings were interested in him in the first place.
Thielen looked good. KJ Osborne looked good. You even had a couple of tight end catches that didn't look terrible, one of which bailed us out on the last drive of the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. After the Muntastrophe of, was it 2 weeks ago? Or was it last week against the Saints? That brutal Johnny Munt drop. And the brutal Irv Smith drop from a couple weeks before that. It was nice to see a little bit more sure-handedness from the tight ends. I believe they ended up with almost 50 yards total in receiving, which I think, given this receiving core, is kind of a big deal, right? I think that's kind of what you wanted. You're not expecting like the tight ends to end up with like 100 yards unless something has gone like horribly wrong for the opposing team. But it was nice. I mean, we did see Irv Smith commit a couple, or I think just the one penalty, the holding penalty, that hurt a lot. But near the end of the game, we ended up seeing like the 13-yarder on 3rd and 4. That was, it was just great. It was great to have Smith available on the end of the drive, or the end of the game, because those 2 catches that he had in the final drive were just so crucial, especially because the Vikings were kind of left behind the chains. Both because of a false start and because of a negative yardage run. So to be able to bail them out, really good stuff.
Actually, before I get to the final drive and before I get to Dalvin Cook, we take a moment to talk about how hilarious it was to watch the Bears go out for their first play? And all this is planned. You have your first 25 plays, something like that, drawn up.
15 to 20.
Yeah, 15 to 20. Yeah, and they got to delay a game because they weren't set. Nobody was delayed game. They didn't have enough people up there. They didn't have the right personnel up there. How do you even do that?
Like
they followed it up with a Montgomery 20-yard run. So
right,
fine.
Yeah. I mean,
but
that.
Still, you start off with a delay of game because you don't have the right people out for your first play that you drew up earlier in the week.
They set the tone. That's what they did. Just
phenomenal. So let's talk about Dalvin Cook. There was a lot of Alexander Mattison in the game. It almost looked like a 60-40 Dalvin Cook thing. Despite that, Dalvin ended up with over 100 yards and looked good.
Yeah. He had a combined 100 and was it 21 yards, something like that. Yeah, no, he looked pretty fantastic. I think that, and the thing is, it's not like he ripped off a 40-yard run, right, and then had a bunch of 4 or 5 yarders to finish it out. I mean, it wasn't a Peterson.
It wasn't a Peterson day.
Yeah, exactly. He was consistent, and he was able to consistently generate just ahead of what the Vikings needed. First and 10, you get 5 yards instead of 4 type stuff. And he was doing a pretty good job navigating some of the holes that the Vikings were creating. Again, I thought that the left side of the line did a really remarkable job as run blocking to kind of create a lot of these opportunities. But Cook navigated it really well. And remember last week we had a mailbag question asking if Dalvin Cook was slowing down, and physically speaking, he definitely has burst, right? In camp, I had remarked that he looked faster than I remember, and he still has yet to have a game with multiple 40 plus yard runs that would kind of hopefully imply. It feels like he's gotten close to breaking one out. But in this game, he was kind of doing some of the tougher work of grinding out a lot of these tough yards, maybe peppering in a 10-yard run here, a 15-yard run there. But he did a really excellent job getting to the goal line and then punching it in once he was there. I think he had a pair of rushing touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, we've been, I don't want to say we've been waiting for a game like this, because I think that, once he has a 150-yard game, we'll say the same thing. But, we've been kind of hoping for Cook to be a more consistent presence on the team as a runner specifically. And this is kind of the game where you're able to see that happen.
Cook did also end up in a situation where he bounced off his blocker and fell down, just oh, okay. That's just what we're doing today.
It feels like that's been happening. I guess he did technically get injured on one of the bounce off the blocker plays a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, it feels like that's been happening a little bit. Maybe mind Brian O'Neill a little bit more next time.
I guess it turns out you just bounced there, dude. Let's try to avoid that. Last thing I want to talk about is the final drive of the game for the Vikings, burning 7 minutes, several third down conversions, and Cousins looking lights out like this is in fact Kirktober.
Yeah, no, we started off Kirktoberfest the right way. Yeah, a 7-minute drive. First of all, I don't think they drained that much clock if they didn't have so much trouble converting on first and second down. So some of it is not necessarily, beautiful clock management, but it is good clock management. Yeah, I mean, that's why, they started off some of these plays with runs, right? So they get a false start to open the drive, and they have to rely on Irv Smith to get them the next 15 yards. But, once they're on first and 10, they run the ball, like I said, Dalvin Cook, 5 yards instead of 4. Then they pass to Dalvin Cook, 4 yards in second and 5 to get 3rd and 1. Right? That's why you're calling these plays, is because it helps you drain the clock. It kind of creates some third downs. And then you get behind the chains. So now you have to pass a little bit. So you pass to Justin Jefferson, you pass to Irv Smith again, and then you run the ball some more. And that's kind of where, the Bears knew that the run was coming. The Bears are, in fairness, one of the worst run defenses in the league. So, take all of this praise for the run blocking with a grain of salt. The Vikings have not been very good running the ball this year, so this is not necessarily a corrective. But, getting 10 yards here, not necessarily the easiest thing in the world when everybody's kind of keyed in on you. And when, again, the Vikings were off schedule, they were able to, pass here or there for Adam Thielen, pass here or there for Justin Jefferson, and generate, a bunch of short, consistent gains that allowed them to drain the clock and still get themselves into scoring position. before they execute the first quarterback sneak I've seen since Teddy. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's been a really long time. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw Kirk Cousins go for a quarterback sneak. Like, he's awkward enough moving forward anyway.
Right, you're right. And I don't think that's necessarily, like, the fact that he doesn't do it, I don't think that's necessarily, like, his fault. I think that's more of kind of a Zimmer construction that he doesn't want quarterback sneaks. But I don't recall any time in the Kirk Cousins era him doing it. And I feel like Teddy has done it once or twice. Either way, it's been a long time, and I know that Vikings fans have been demanding that the quarterback sneak be implemented, which is like kind of a funny thing because it's just like one play in a somewhat rare situation. But like, you see Brady do it again and again. You see Mahomes do it again and again successfully. Drew Brees, all 6'0" of him, do it again and again successfully. And you're like, wow, why isn't it happening here? And sometimes I think the Vikings are right not to quarterback sneak it, right? And in some post-game pressers, we've asked about it, and Cousins has said, it was in the playbook, but the look wasn't there. And that's appropriate, right? If they're stuffing the either A gap with two big bodies, and you have, Garrett Bradbury and maybe Oli Udoh actually would be pretty good in a quarterback sneak, maybe exclusively in that situation. But, Charlie Johnson, right? As your lead blockers in the quarterback sneak, maybe you don't call it against, two nose tackles in the A gap. But here, the Vikings had an open opportunity. Garrett Bradbury was really feeling himself all game, and they sneak it. And the first person Cousins thanks, Garrett Bradbury. He's like, that was all you, bud, which is, that's the kind of wholesome Cousins we all appreciate before we remember all the other stuff.
I mean, there is that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we missed over the game, or anything we should do to wrap it up?
Yeah, I was just like, the Vikings are a little bit too confident in Greg Joseph now, and they need to tone it down.
It's unfortunate.
And a 15-yard punt from Ryan Wright. No,
I was about to bring that up because it's unfortunate that we've been in situations where the offense looks good, the defense looks good, or the offense looks good, defense does not look good, special teams is great. You go, okay, well, we're getting there. We have a part today, or we have a part on Sunday where it's like, all right, offense looked great, defense looked great. Oh, hey, special teams are back to being terrible. Why can't we have all three phases working?
It's just not who the Vikings are.
It's a terrible punt. And you saw it on his face immediately. He knew what happened.
Yeah, it just didn't feel good coming off. Yeah.
Plus absolutely. The penalty that brought him forward. And he's like, really? Even that? Come on.
Well, you kick from your own 45 and they get the ball at the 50. That stings.
Yeah. At that point, Kirk Cousins could have arm punted it much further.
Yeah, or punted it much further.
Underrated ability that doesn't get brought out very often. Kirk Cousins as the emergency punter.
Well, I think it is safe to say that he could punt it more than 5 yards, although, you can't make any bets on this team.
There are known knowns and there are known unknowns. All right, let's go to the mailbag here. Lake Cavassier starts us off with, for a Reef's modern defense schematics corner, while I admire Ed Donatel's commitment to scientifically testing the theory that run defense doesn't matter, can you explain why he simultaneously refuses to defend short to intermediate passes or pressure the quarterback?
So yeah, he does not blitz as often as I think makes a lot of sense or is appropriate. So there's that. Though he did blitz Justin Fields a fair bit more than he usually does. Again, below league average, but more than the usual amount of blitzing. So, I guess we're grading him on a curve on that respect. But so it kind of reminds me when I was reading about when the Tampa 2 defense was created, right? One of the things that Tony Dungy would preach is, first of all, they would have no cover zones, right? And defenders would ask hey, what do we do if they run a 3-yard curl? There's no one there. And Tony Dungy is like, yeah, they catch a 3-yard curl, right? That's what, yeah. And he would say, that punts are turnovers, right? You want them to ultimately punt the ball. You don't want them to have big plays. And it feels like there's something in that. Obviously, the Tampa 2 defense did all right. It started a defensive era of football. It led to multiple Super Bowls, not just in Tampa Bay, but also Super Bowl appearance by two Tampa 2 teams with the Chicago Bears and the Indianapolis Colts in 2006. Obviously the defense worked, right? Like, I'm not getting out of that, but it feels like sometimes some of these concepts can get overextended. I don't know what to do with that, right? Like, it's just like, I think that's part of it. I think also part of it is this, like, the sense that the team doesn't have the talent to do anything more, right? Like, that feels like that's part of it, right? Is that Donatello is designing a defense that accommodates the fact that the cornerbacks are not very good. And I get that, but, like, there are ways that you can accommodate the fact that Patrick Peterson is not winning deep downfield against a 4-2 receiver, while also taking advantage of the fact that Cameron Dancer is playing all right. Now, I guess the issue is, the more complex the defense is, the more likely it is Cameron Dancer is going to F it up, right? Like that was one of the big plays that they gave up a couple of weeks ago, right? Is that Cameron Dancer just wasn't there and Cameron Bynum got blamed for it. So fair enough, but, like, it's not like what's happening now is working either. Like, I feel like at some point you just have to be like, look, we have to accommodate 90% of the things that can happen on a football field with our defense. We're not doing that. Playing just a bunch of off coverage zone type stuff that looks a lot more like spot drop zone than it looks like than match zone, which is just basically obsolete in the NFL because quarterbacks can tear it apart. I think it's a response both to defense, both a response to defensive talent, some fright about kind of what the defense is actually capable of, and some overextension of some common defensive philosophies.
Can we talk about the end of that game for a moment and the ripping out of the ball? I feel like we glossed over just how nice, how like cathartic an ending that was. And the quote from the presser about how they had some inside info that Marset was going to be a little loose holding the ball.
That was very funny, especially because the person who ripped the ball out was the one who said it, right? They asked Dancer, like, about the fumble, and he's like, we had some intel that Amir Smith-Marset's loose with the ball. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. But yeah, good scouting report that you somehow managed to get.
Yeah, funny how that works. Let's go to Ed Donatello, who asks, what should we learn from Brian Asamoah's 6 defensive snaps on Sunday, and what does it tell us about how we might see more of him going forward? Also, is it time to change my Twitter name?
So, yes, it is time to. Well, I mean, okay, so I'll say this. Some really great Twitter accounts on Vikings Twitter are about players that are not good, or coaches that are not good. So maybe you don't have to, but if you're really committed to having somebody that you like as your Twitter muse.
And it's still fairly clever. I mean,
it is. And plus the work to Photoshop in Donatello's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, the
headband eye thing, yeah.
The mask, eye mask, yeah. That's nice.
I mean, I think Forrester has one of the Kubiaks.
Yeah, he's Gary Kubiak.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's a bunch of good Vikings accounts and Forrester that. But yeah, but I like Lock to Mini, like that guy's not even on the team, right? That's just a Drew Lock Stan account, kind of.
It's more.
You're fine with that Donatello is what I'm saying.
More in principle than not. So about Brian Asamoah.
Oh yeah. I don't think he played well, but they just kind of wanted a quarterback spy out there. So
yeah,
there he went.
Michael Lacoste asks, how bad is this defense? We know it's bad, but it feels really bad. I can't tell if it's true or if it's just an adjustment period we'll get through, or if we're just feeling the absence of Zimmer's defensive scheming. I just want to remind everyone that 2 years of bad Zimmer defense seems to be forgotten in the discourse about this game.
Sort of. The Zimmer defense thing is so weird to parse, especially last year. Like 2 years ago, it was just bad. Last year, it played well really well for most of the game, and then catastrophically poorly at specific high leverage moments of the game. So it's like very difficult to really get an understanding of like that. That's how trauma is built, like in an actual psychological sense. So, having a handle, I understand why people may not have a handle on that entirely. Now, again, to talk about football, the defense is just kind of bad, right? Like, again, it is doing well in the second halves of a lot of these games, right? It didn't allow a point, I believe, against the Eagles. Did they allow a point against the Saints? I don't know. There are two games where they didn't allow a point in the second half. They've been really good in second half defensive situations. Some of that is, some luck with like missed kicks and stuff like that. But, they're forcing kicks instead of allowing touchdowns. So there are moments where the defense is good, and we're just kind of remembering these opening moments of the game where they're just like giving up all kinds of points, and you're just like wondering what the heck is going on. And that's kind of imprinted upon you as you think about the defense. But no, in terms of like EPA per play given up, the defense is 22nd in the NFL. It is a little bit worse against the run, as you'd expect a defense that is entirely built around being essentially a too high defense with nobody in the box. The combination of those two things. But, the benefit to that is that it is a little bit better against the pass than, you'd expect otherwise. And so, yeah, the defense it's not catastrophically bad. There's a lot of worse defenses out there. Chicago's is a good example of one. We just saw the Raiders get torched by the Chiefs, but they've been having trouble all year. The Titans, the Cardinals probably have maybe the worst defense in the NFL. The Lions are up there. The Dolphins, despite how well they've been playing with Tua in there, have been playing with a poor defense. The Rams have a worse defense than the Vikings. So the fact that I can name multiple teams, the Falcons have a worse defense, I think. The fact that I can name like multiple teams that have a worse defense and run out, like I probably forgot, like, I don't know, the Commanders or something, right? And run out of teams. That tells us it's better than the perception that we're seeing online. It's just like you see a bunch of stuff happen in a row. You see a little bit of luck that helps that you don't attribute to the defense, and now you think the defense is bad, and I totally get it, but the defense is basically below average. It's not the worst in the NFL by any reasonable stretch of the imagination.
If you listen to Ron Rivera, he seems to believe that the problem is not the defense as to why they've been losing these games.
I 100% agree. It's the quarterback. He's right. I mean, who am I to question like a 15-year veteran head coach, Ron Rivera?
Just, you don't usually hear that sort of biting criticism.
So I will, to remove myself from the bit, I will say that Rivera, I believe, was talking about building a culture around having a quarterback on your team for a long time. Because it wouldn't make sense for him to be like, yeah, man, I really wish I had Cooper Rush, right? Like, I think, despite the fact that Cooper Rush is like 5-0 and obviously deserves your respect, but it seems like he was trying to get across something else about the nature of having a quarterback. But like when asked why like all the NFC East teams were 4-1 except his 1-4 team, you probably shouldn't say the quarterback. You're communicating the wrong idea. He is attempting to say something about cultivating a quarterback and having them in your building a long time, like a Dak Prescott, like a Daniel Jones, like a Jalen Hurts. But that is not a great answer to, hey, so the immediate circumstances are dire. What is the immediate problem? You can't just be like, quarterback.
I envision Carson Wentz sitting down to eat ice cream or something, and like he's on his phone and he sees the video or that tweet or something.
Blows up. Yeah.
It's like, I don't even want this anymore.
Well, I mean, Carson Wentz has a 100% coaches hate him rate, so
that is how that's working. Somebody had tweeted out, it's like, it is funny how like everyone seems to not like playing for the guy. So
yeah, that's just the culture that they cultivated at NDSU.
Not touching that yet. Gustav asks, Statheads criticize the Vikings' average yards per attempt on pass plays, but the Vikings now have 2 of the top 6 passers in yards per attempt, Ryan Wright and Justin Jefferson. Should this silence the nerds forever?
Yes.
Absolutely. Kirk Donkadonk. Really?
Man,
in terms of game plan...
Ed Donatello, your username is fine.
Yeah. In terms of game plan, is this insane level of first half usage for JJ likely to persist? Also, is this to force defenses to account for him more in the second half to open up for the rest of the offense, or is this kind of just how things are working out?
I think it's just kind of how things are working out. Like, obviously, the way that they design a lot of these plays, Jefferson's like the first read on a lot of them, but that's like not unusual, right? Like the first read in a lot of Washington plays, to call back to the team we were just talking about, is like it's Terry McLaurin, obviously. Now they have got Jahan Dotson there, but it's Terry McLaurin, right? The first read in a lot of Seahawks plays is DK Metcalf. Like the way you call these plays is that, maybe you'll have your top receiver be your alert because the alert is basically designed to draw coverage. But very often, most of the plays for most of the game, that top receiver is going to be kind of the first read unless, you've got a safety rotation or an alert or something else happening. So they're designing plays not for or around Justin Jefferson, but with Justin Jefferson in mind. And, he's good enough to like get open. So yeah, he gets open. Kirk throws him the ball. So I think that that's it. I don't think that it's like that they are intentionally using Justin Jefferson a lot early in the game to open up stuff for everybody else. They're like throwing to the open guy because it gets you yards. That does have the knock-on effect of, forcing defenses to continue to account for Jefferson and eventually leaving or sometimes abandoning entirely based off of some of the looks that we've seen players like KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen and Irv Smith, right? But mostly it is just kind of how things are working out. I do not believe this level of first half usage is likely to persist. I think that instead we will see games where he gets like 40 yards in the first half and everyone's going to ask where he is. And then he'll get like 80 yards in the second half and no one is bothered. Like, it's Vikings Twitter. Someone's going to be bothered. But for the most part, most people are not bothered. This is just how it's working out.
Brian asks, so I'm good with this version of Kirk for now. He's winning and making plays when it counts for the most part. But are Kirk's picks a result of him being more aggressive in the scheme and throwing more interceptable passes? Or is he throwing the same percentage of interceptable passes as prior years and defenses are just capitalizing them on them at a higher rate?
Yeah, so I looked into this, and it's the second thing, which that's actually really encouraging. So he has had 7 turnover-worthy plays, 5 interceptions, right? That is very high, relatively speaking to the rest of the NFL and relatively speaking over the course of a period of time. That's about 71, 72%, right? That is not likely to sustain itself. The average rate is about actually 60%. So when you take a look at, over the past couple of years, what turnover worthy plays turn into interceptions, he should be throwing 4 instead of 5. I know that that's only 1, but you take a look at last year when he only threw 7 picks and he happened to also throw 33 touchdowns, a phenomenal, actually familiar touchdown interception ratio for Vikings fans. I believe it was identical for Brett Favre in the 2009 season. He threw 18 turnover-worthy plays. So that means that his interception to turnover-worthy play ratio was 39%, let's say 40%. That's lucky. He got lucky. He got lucky in a way that makes his numbers look good and helped the Vikings out a ton because interceptions are extremely costly, which I know is like, shocking news. The year before, he threw 13 interceptions, but he the exact same number of turnover-worthy plays, 18. Now, the turnover-worthy plays metric not only doesn't count interceptions that bounce off of a receiver's hands as turnover-worthy plays, which is appropriate, right? That's more the fault of the receiver than it is the quarterback. But it also includes stuff like Hail Marys. And, I recall a couple of scenarios where Vikings quarterbacks, including Kirk Cousins and Teddy Bridgewater, would rack up some interception numbers with some Hail Marys at the end of the game. And those are not counted in the turnover-worthy play calculation. So we want to know if Cousins is throwing more turnover-worthy plays per pass attempt. And the answer is functionally no. Technically he is, but that's just a result of a very low sample. So his turnover-worthy play rate right now is 3.1%. His turnover-worthy play rate last year was 2.8%, and the year before was 2.9%. Those are not meaningful differences. So he should be throwing 4 picks. He's thrown 5. Going forward, if he throws 11 more turnover-worthy plays, which would be in line with historical averages, you would imagine that 60% of them get intercepted. That's about 6.6, right? So that's basically 7. So he'll throw 12 picks basically if he continues this rate, and we regress to the mean. That's not an amazing interception total, but it doesn't mean that he's necessarily being more careless with the ball. The problem is his big time throw rate. He threw deeper a lot more last year and the year before and the year before that. He generated a lot more big plays all of those years. He had a 5% big time throw rate, which is pretty high relative to the NFL. And his average depth of target was much, much higher. He was in the top half of average depth of target each of the previous 3 years. Now he's near the bottom of the NFL in depth of target at 6.6 instead of 8.7. So the interceptions are coming at the cost of not having as much on your positive plays, either in terms of big plays, because his big time throw rate is 2.8%. That's half of last year. And not being able to generate as many touchdowns. So the problem isn't that Kirk Cousins is throwing interceptable passes. It's that those are not associated with high value plays. He's just not throwing them as often. And so that needs to happen a lot more, especially as he is holding onto the ball a little bit longer than he did last year without any of kind of the benefits. So the Vikings were not calling very much play action early in the year. Now they are calling play action at a reasonable rate. A lot of those play action plays are not coming with deep shots. And of course, one of the turnover-worthy plays, I believe the interception that he threw actually against the Bears, came when he tried to throw deep on a play action when he shouldn't have. So it's never like a one-size-fit-all thing. But yeah, he's throwing interceptions at the same rate. He's just not getting as much out of it as he normally is.
James's residual Cockney accent asks, so there's a name that needs to change. Maybe James's non-existent Cockney accent, since I didn't make it. DJ Wanham, best edge rusher on the Vikings? ?
DJ Wanham is producing. He has the second most pressures on the team. He has the second most sacks on the team. He's playing the best football of his life. He's still not as good as the 3 other edge rushers. That's just not happening. But his pressure rate is very high. I will give you that. And he's playing actually quite well.
Kenneth Allen asks, somehow all 4 NFC North teams had embarrassing meltdowns yesterday, which is even more impressive when 2 of them played each other. Who had the most disappointing performance, and are any of these teams legitimately good?
Okay, so that last one, I do not have an answer for you. I think obviously, the Lions being kind of the highest scoring team in the NFL and then getting blanked, that one kind of sucks, but I don't know any Lions fans that were super confident that this was a for real team. First of all, because the Lions are now 1-4, right? They haven't been winning these games. They've just been scoring a lot.
Right. Reisman was furious on Twitter, but that was about it.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. But it's kind of a furiousness, a ferocity. No, that's ferocious. A furiousness that is born out of a frustration of knowing what's happening, less out of where did this come from sort of thing, right? So, in a sense, right, that the Lions are disappointing, but I wouldn't put them up there just because I think, a bunch of Lions fans were not just waiting for the bottom to fall out, because again, they weren't winning these games, but were prepared for something like this to occur, right? The Vikings, Bears. So the Bears ultimately disappointed because they collapsed, but I don't think any Bears fans had reasonable expectations of wanting to win or of winning the game. So I don't think that counts. The Vikings, not only did they end up winning, I think that a lot of fans were prepared for the Vikings to vastly underperform against an inferior opponent, as they often do and have often done. So that I don't think is the case. I think it's the Packers against the Giants. Now, the Packers, I think, are probably the best example of a disappointing game because, first of all, the Giants are just not a very good team. All of their wins have come, I'm not going to say fluky, but have come like really late. They're not very dominant wins. They don't have a very good quarterback. They don't have a very good defense. And the Packers were at a point where not only could they rack up a win against a quote unquote strong opponent, but they had all of the reason to be able to prove that all of the noise that people were talking about this offseason, right? Like Aaron Rodgers never gets a first round receiver, or Devontae Adams leaving is going to cripple them. You can't have like a run forward offense in the NFL with your two elite running backs. That defense is never going to come together. You should get vaccinated. None of those things were going to matter when Aaron Rodgers was able to put the stomp on a bad defense. And that didn't happen, right? They just collapsed against the Giants. A really poor game against the Giants. And, the Giants went to London too. Like there's no excuse. Both teams had the same limitations. And it was like, you had a bunch of opportunities to demonstrate that your team, especially with Alan Lazard healthy, David Bakhtiari healthy, Elton Jenkins healthy, a bunch of opportunities to demonstrate your team could legitimately compete. And it was against a team that not only were you favored by a somewhat substantial margin, but like a team that like is just not impressive. Like Brian Daboll is doing a heck of a job, but like it's just not an impressive team. That I think is the most disappointing. I think more were emotionally prepared for the Vikings performance, the Bears performance, and the Lions performance than they were for the Packers performance. So I think that one is by far the most disappointing.
It was just amazing to watch the ending of that game. And like Rodgers has been yelling at receivers all year. Yeah. But like it really seemed to hit home this time around. Like, boy, and when justice when you've lost justice, you've lost a lot of Packers people. There was a tweet earlier today about name a Hall of Famer who'd be like a mid at best in 2022. His response was Aaron Rodgers. And I'm just like, oh no. That is a man who maybe should have taken this year off.
Yeah,
find something
I
to
love
do.
That he did.
Hang out with some family. Do what you got to do. Just, I'm not gonna pressure you to do anything you don't want to do. But Swervin Shervin asks, last year I asked a very poignant question regarding Allen Robinson. I want to know if anything's changed in the situation, so I will ask again. Is Mitch Trubisky the best quarterback Allen Robinson has played with?
Oh, come on, man. Allen Robinson finally makes a good decision and gets to go to a team with a real quarterback. Again, historically, this isn't just an NFL thing. Allen Robinson played with Mitch Trubisky, and he played with Blake Bortles, and maybe Blaine Gabbert 24. No, it was just Blake Bortles. So he played with Blake Bortles and Mitch Trubisky in the NFL. But before that, this is so tragic. Before that, he played with Christian Hackenberg at Penn State. Then the question caused so much of like concern for me that I looked into who his quarterback was in high school. And this dude, it's a high school player, right? So like, I don't want to like dunk on him too hard, but like he wasn't a scholarship athlete, right? He went to a D3 school, and I believe he played lacrosse, right? Like he's just not a quarterback. So Allen Robinson has been tortured all his life with bad quarterbacks. So he finally goes to a team that had a quarterback that, was in an MVP conversation kind of for a good chunk of the year, right? I think we all recall that happened for like 10 weeks, I think, before Stafford kind of struggled a little bit near the end of the season with a ton of pick sixes.
Yep. And then all of a sudden turned it around in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you get the pick sixes out of the way when they don't matter, right?
Yep.
It's how that works. But he goes to like a strong-armed quarterback that's not afraid to sling it, that's generally pretty accurate, that's got remarkable improvisational ability with a great offensive mind. And boy, was this not Stafford's year, it turns out. But no, I mean, Stafford this year is struggling, right? I don't want to get around that, but he's like better than Mitch Trubisky was in Chicago. Let's This is just too much, man. Please stop doing this to me.
Next year, when he signs up for Green Bay.
Actually, do you think he's the cause? Maybe that's it. Christian Hackenberg I believe he wasn't just a 5-star quarterback. I think he was the top quarterback in the country when he was recruited. Right? Blake Bortles, 1st round pick, 3rd pick overall.
Allen Robinson is the Ewing theory for all of this. But it couldn't be the Ewing theory, because that would mean that they would be successful after he left. And that's definitely not what's happening to Trubisky.
Look at what Mitch Trubisky did in the preseason. Look what he did for the first game.
Yeah, and then every other game happened, and that kind of runs that out. It's entirely possible he's just like the mole who goes in and ruins these quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's true. Hackenberg did not necessarily have a great career post Allen Robinson. So maybe Ewing theory is not appropriate here, but there's something.
Yeah, something's wrong here. Peter Lucie asks, 4 years ago today, Jimmy Butler went to Timberwolves practice, played with the 3rd stringers, beat the first team while yelling, "You blanking need me. You can't win without me." What's the wildest practice you ever covered?
Yeah, first of all, it's not like Jimmy Butler was necessarily like wrong.
Well, he wasn't, but he was still like, you could still be correct and be a terrible person. And that's kind of been the theme of his career.
You're not wrong. You're just an a-hole. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. Second, I don't think I've ever covered an altercation in practice quite like that. I mean, I've covered like practices with fights and stuff, but you know, most of the time that happens in football, it's happening like in meeting rooms and stuff, and not like on the field as much. Although receivers being upset with the quality of their quarterback certainly is an issue. And I wish I was there to cover practices for the Percy Harvin Christian Ponder era, because that sounds like it would be extremely entertaining and informative. But I didn't. So I would have to go for an answer that is probably like relatively inappropriate to the tone of the question, which is the day Teddy Bridgewater literally almost died. Still don't know what happened because no one was like paying attention to handoffs in practice, but yeah, that was pretty wild. I would say that was a wild day.
And you've described that before as like no one was even really paying attention because it was just such a nothing play.
Yeah, right. Like it wasn't like somebody like accidentally hit him on a sack when they should have pulled up because he's wearing a red jersey. Like for the most part, you're not like really looking at practice, right? Like you're checking to see who's available. You're seeing kind of if they're doing anything interesting. Basically, if anything catches your eye, mind you, they are far away at practice. Like they're not doing red zone drills in front of you while you're on the other side of the end zone. Like they're like on the other side of the 50 and you're not allowed to go over there. So it's not like, you've got an eagle eye on these. You're just trying to see like, hey, is it Dalvin Cook split out wide? That's interesting. I'll think about that. Right. Like you're not paying attention to like the specifics of every play, nor will you have the ability to. So yeah. And so like shouts and then everybody stops. And like, that's when you start paying attention. So yeah. But it was like a moment.
Let's go to Cody, who asks, with the struggling Panthers firing Matt Rule, it appears the Panthers are progressing as a franchise. Considering Kevin O'Connell's FBI father was, likely, part of COINTELPRO, do you think Rule's firing and the Panthers seemingly progressing upsets Kevin O'Connell's father? I just want to point out that this guy's tried for weeks to get a question in about this. This is the one we're doing.
This is fucking good. Once I can breathe.
Amazing.
So, first of all, Kevin O'Connell's father, yes, retired FBI agent. He played a pivotal role in getting John Gotti arrested in 1990. At least as it is relayed to us, right? So, Bill O'Connell, been an FBI agent for quite a while. I don't think he was old enough for COINTELPRO. Um, like this was primarily, so this is all like mostly declassified stuff now, so it's not really a conspiracy. It's a series of, I'm going to just read the Wikipedia description so that I personally am not inflecting potentially my own bias. But a reminder, Bill O'Connell worked for the FBI from 1983 to 2007. All right. COINTELPRO, a syllabic abbreviation derived from Counterintelligence Program 1956 to 1971, was a series of covert and illegal projects, there are citations, it's a Wikipedia article, actively conducted by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting domestic American political organizations. FBI records show COINTELPRO resources targeted groups and individuals the FBI deemed subversive, including feminist organizations, the Communist Party USA, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists of the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, e.g., Martin Luther King, the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, environmentalists and animal rights organizations, the American Indian Movement, founded, by the way, in Minneapolis, Chicano and Mexican American groups like Brown Berets and the United Farm Workers, independent movements, including Puerto Rican independence movements such as Young Lords and the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a variety of organizations that are part of the broader New Left, and far-right groups as well, such as the Ku Klux Klan and the National States Rights Party. 1956 to 1971, Bill O'Connell started working for the FBI in 1983, according to public reports. Also, he's like 67. It's unlikely that he, worked for COINTELPRO.
But it's fun to dream.
Yeah, because that was, like, the conclusion of that was 50 years ago. He did not start working for the FBI probably when he was 16. But, it's covert operations. Anything could have happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, do I think rules firing and the Panthers seemingly progressing upsets Kevin O'Connell's father? Let's just go with yes. Yes.
Let's just do that for the sake of argument. Neil asks, Thanksgiving will be my first ever home game, US Bank Stadium. Who will have the better record by then, the Vikings or the Patriots?
So the Patriots are 2-3, I think. The Vikings are 4-1. So that would require the Patriots to win out and the Vikings to lose out in the next couple of weeks, I think. Funny question, but it's come on, it's the Vikings. Vikings have a better record.
Well, we can hope anyway. Kyle Slaby.
Lord. A lot of questions to ask if that's not the case.
Yeah. We'll have a lot of fun episodes between now and then. Kyle Slaby asks, is Geno Smith the best quarterback in the NFC West?
I'm happy for Geno Smith. He's playing the best football of his life. He's very confident about that fact, which is really cool to see. He is statistically, by a good margin, the best quarterback in the NFC West. But were I to wipe the slate clean and say, hey, you get a game tomorrow, you get to pick your offensive coordinator, and you get to pick your quarterback, I don't know that I would pick Geno Smith. I just would not pick Cliff Kingsbury and anybody, right? So no. If I take a look at it, let's see, by EPA per play, right? Because Geno Smith is number one in the NFL in passer rating. He is a little bit more conservative, so he is throwing a little bit shorter. And he's completing a lot of passes, and passer rating overweights completion percentage. And his which, mind you, it's not that he's throwing short passes and racking up a bunch of completions that every quarterback could do. His passer rating, or his completion percentage over expected, is number one in the NFL. I don't want to downplay that fact. But in EPA per play, which this year is prioritizing some of these short throwers like Jimmy Garoppolo, Geno Smith, Jacoby Brissett, he is fifth in the NFL, fourth if you do a cutoff at 130 plays or something like that. So he's fifth in the NFL. Now, if we take a look at the other NFC West passers, so that includes Jimmy Garoppolo, which is the one who's ahead of him in EPA per play, and it also includes Matthew Stafford, and Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray is 20th. Matthew Stafford is 28th in EPA per play. You can see that Geno Smith has kind of separated himself from the group, especially when you combine it with completion percentage over expected, because Jimmy Garoppolo's completion percentage over expected is negative 6.1, and he's not throwing it downfield. So in terms of how often they're successful on plays, when you account for the relative difficulty of the throws, when you account for how deep downfield a quarterback is throwing, Geno Smith is doing better. Garoppolo is EPA per play is a little bit better because likely because he's like throwing it and completing it in more high leverage situations than it is, because Geno Smith is throwing the ball a little bit more on first down than Jimmy Garoppolo is. But yeah, no, I think that neither of these guys is the best quarterback in the NFC West. I think it's either Kyler Murray or Matthew Stafford. I just think that we're just in a really weird circumstance.
I like how Geno Smith. I was just curious what his cap hit is this year. It's $3.5 million, and
Amazing.
then he's an unrestricted free agent next year.
Oh, contract year. Oh, it's perfect. I'm happy for him.
He is. He's in a good spot. Luke Braun has written in, says historically Aaron Rodgers has been clearly susceptible to hexing and general witchcraft. Mm-hmm. Has Blue of Earth hexed him, or is her public denial of being a witch causing her protective magics to fizzle? Is Shailene Woodley the only shield that can protect him?
So, Luke, I did correct your spelling in this in the question to James. I put the K in magics because when we talk about magic like this, obviously, you have to put a K in it. It's like you've never covered hexcraft before.
For somebody who claims to be a moon expert, I was expecting better.
What is going on here? Yeah, honestly. I would say it's much more likely that because so first of all, we have to basically ask two questions: is Blue of Earth motivated to damage Aaron Rodgers in some way, or is Blue of Earth maybe motivated by love and affection for Aaron Rodgers? And while initially the idea that someone could have love and affection for Aaron Rodgers does seem preposterous, this has happened multiple times in his life where people have cared for him, so it is not impossible. I think it is, in fact, actually that route that Blue of Earth is in a committed relationship with Aaron Rodgers, wants to protect him. I've seen no evidence to the contrary. I would hope that we would see a little bit more evidence. It doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers has actually ended any of these relationships with the other person upset with him. I'm not going to say ended these relationships well, because the way the Shailene Woodley relationship ended was very weird. Remember him like writing poems about her and stuff?
There was some weird, if I remember correctly, there was some weird thing involving Nick Swardson and one of Aaron Rodgers' exes, where like she was wearing like Vikings gear afterwards. So like it could be a thing. I didn't view it as, I just viewed it as Nick Swardson being dumb, because I tend to just think that often. But like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that one necessarily ended angrily, but questions could be asked.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that Blue of Earth simply is just not up to the task in the way that Shailene Woodley was. I think that the public denial of being a witch, I think that that's got to be part of it, right? The spirits don't really love repudiation. I think that that's like fairly self-evident at this point. Why am I explaining basic witchcraft to our listeners? But it's
just a very fun sentence.
Yeah, come on. I think that it's not that Shailene Woodley is the only shield that can protect him. Rather, it's Aaron Rodgers is in such a deep state of magical danger, right? Distress. He's a constant target of hexes that you really need an experienced witch to provide him with the magical shields he needs. Obviously, we've seen the problems with baby witches before. You can't be meddling in high level stuff above your ken. You just can't. It's just not safe. And so I think it's the inexperience of not knowing that, public repudiation of the spirits is going to be damaging to your witchcraft, which I feel like, that it's one of those lessons when you say it out loud is obvious, but like in the moment, you're not really thinking about it. And it's kind of one of those things that experience kind of teaches you. So understandable, but you're in a spot. I don't know exactly how Blue Earth can recover this. Certainly, there are magics and rituals that one can perform that'll put you back in the good graces, which I would not be at liberty to reveal. But you have to get across the barrier, and you have to, I think, make up for that repudiation.
Yeah. I'm just going to say yeah here. Nolan Kaler, we're going to get back to football here in a second, I promise. Nolan Kaler says, Happy Thanksgiving from North Code. How can Arif translate his turkey argument on this side of the 49th parallel? Perhaps a redux in Francois is in order.
This reminds me, so I was talking to some people who are from Canada, and they said something about how Americans from like Minnesota are just Canadians but louder, which I took great exception to, by the way. Not because I'm not louder than a Canadian, I am, but rather because we have a number of different cultural differences. One of which is that we love guns, right? Totally different. But
I like. Are you including yourself in that?
I love guns.
I just want to see that on the Norse code out of context thing. That's the only reason I asked that. Go
on. But like there were some questions about, can you be kind of more American than Americans? And I said, yeah, you could be from Texas, right? That's more American than American. Even though Texas is obviously an independent republic, independent of the United States, non-American, but more American than Americans. And I was like, kind of in the same way that Quebecois are more French than French people because they're more annoying. That's going to get me in trouble. Anyway, I refuse to give my turkey argument in French. I think that any relevant entities that want to translate it from English to French are more than welcome to do so. Certainly, I love outreach, but I'm not going to sully myself by learning French to do so. The Canadians should know that turkey is a trash meat. For the most part, they make more gravy than a lot of Americans do. Maybe not more than Southerners, but they make a ton of gravy for their poutine. So they should know that like producing gravy out of good meats instead of trash meats, bears a lot of positive fruit. So I would imagine they're even more aware of the fact that turkeys are just no good. But happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Kind of a weird weekend for it to fall on, given that it's Indigenous Peoples Day in the United States. But, I hope that's not on purpose. But, the happy Thanksgiving, eat lots of good food.
Next question is going to be from Don from Ohio, who has a legitimate question here.
Yeah, incredible.
It's terrifying, quite frankly.
Yeah, sign of the end times.
The James Madison Dukes are nationally ranked in the top 25. NDSU has never cracked the top 25 ever. Can we finally put to rest the notion NDSU was ever a legit college football program?
Yeah, and it's just like, it's weird, right? Because like the idea, the notion, as you say, that NDSU is a legit college football program, it felt like it's one of those things where it was like a meme, right? It's like so obviously untrue. We're going to joke about it for a while. And then people just started believing it, and then they started defending it, ironically, and then legitimately. And now you've got a whole group of people, an entire state even, that believes that NDSU is a legitimate college football program, but they've never been ranked in the top 25, and we know that they won't be, right? They're never going to have the gumption to be able to play the kinds of opponents they need to play in order to be top 25. They've got one Super Bowl a year against an FBS opponent. Sometimes they get up for it. Many times they don't. They lost against Arizona, right? But like, yeah, it just seems like this idea that NDSU is legitimately competitive is just like, it's something that just occurred online that just kind of spiraled out of control. No. And we have solid proof. I mean, this is the fastest any team has ever been ranked in college football history. And they should suspend the waiver and allow JMU to compete in a bowl game, or obviously this is in the offing, the college football playoff. Absolutely nuts that they don't get that opportunity right away.
it seems odd in the post like transfer, like in the post like money window, or in the post money era, that like this is still a thing. Because in years past, okay, fine, it's not something that you'd expect programs to take a couple of years, whatever. This is a program that was off and running, and they lost their number one receiver.
Yeah, Antoine Well, who, by the way, is currently the leading receiver at South Carolina, like a legit FBS. Some people call him a draft pick. I think that he has a really good shot of being kind of a mid to late rounder. Like, they lost their best receiver, and they're killing people.
That was such a fun game.
It was legitimately a very fun game to watch.
The fact that it was on NFL Network too, like national coverage for this. Only way it would have been better is if it was actually at JMU's home stadium, just to show just how gorgeous the whole area is. But
the views are like obscene. They're unbelievable. Like these blue mountains in the background.
It was funny because there was a job posting for JMU that I looked at last year and went, I'm not going to do that. I can't justify that. It apparently reopened, and a friend sent it to me, and I was like, okay, well, just because I'm curious, I was starting to look up homes in the area just because I wanted to see what like prices were like, and it was cheaper than I was expecting. And there was like one duplex for like $325 or whatever, and the backyard was just mountains, and I was like, oh, you're kidding me.
Come on.
Like, there's no way that I'm going to move before my son turns 18. But come on. Doing this to me. Oh, God. Great game. Go Dukes. And they sold out Homecoming. Homecoming is going to be a packed house. That game should be on ESPN Plus on Saturday.
Incredible. Who are they playing?
Some powder puff, I believe. Because, it's Homecoming. Last year they demolished the Camels.
Yeah, the Camels. This is Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
That's Homecoming?
That's Homecoming.
Well, that's a team. I mean, they're 0-2 in the conference and 3-3, but Georgia Southern is like a historic Sun Belt power, right? This is not scheduling somebody from like Division II to crush them. This is like a real legitimate football team.
Yeah. This is what they're doing, and they could make a real run at this, so who knows? But let's go to Damian Barrett, who asks, question for James's relationship corner. Where would this fit into James's proposal hall of fame? Now, there's a video posted of a man proposing to a woman at I believe this is at Toronto's baseball stadium, Skydome, and proposed with a ring pop. I'm a terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And I freely admit that.
Yep.
I can't say that I would ever consider proposing with a ring pop.
What about an onion ring?
Nope, not with an onion ring. I'm not Homer Simpson. That's a bit much. If you're already going to spend the money to do it at the stadium, have something. Even if you trade in the ring afterwards and it's just like a standby for a couple $100, just have something.
So here's like the thing. I think that there are definitely couples and definitely people that would really enjoy it because they value humor a lot in a relationship, right? Like there's definitely a group of people that think it would be fun to propose with a ring pop and be fun to be proposed by with a ring pop. It's not a large population by any stretch of the imagination. I asked Chelsea about this. Chelsea is very not into pageantry, and she's one of the few people that wouldn't be upset. I don't know if she would be like overly enthused, but she's like one of the people that wouldn't be upset, right? Which is like an interesting place. But that's kind of cool, right? But like, you gotta know that. Like you absolutely have to know.
If you don't know that, what are you doing proposing?
Exactly. Like if you don't know the kind of like, and a lot of people screw up their proposals. And so like this feels maybe more, but like generally speaking, if you don't know the kind of proposal that your partner wants, just based on who they are as a person, if not like a discussion that you have with them, and not everybody wants to have that discussion because they want a surprise. And, that's the kind of relationship you have, and that's great. But like, if you don't know, like that's just a bad sign, generally speaking. But on top of that, I have to imagine the Venn diagram of people who appreciate big public proposals and people who would like a ring pop as the proposal ring is razor thin. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but that is not a Venn diagram that I would expect to see an enormous amount of people place themselves in. Like that is surprising. And I mean, she slapped him, right? Like,
yep.
I'm not. This is going to go on the Norse code. No context again. I'm not a fan of violence. I'm just going to put that out there. But like, maybe you had it coming, dude.
It was clearly the wrong thing to do. It was clearly the wrong place. Clearly the wrong time. Clearly the wrong ring. You just don't do that. I don't pretend to be like someone who should be trusted with relationship advice.
Despite having an entire corner devoted to you on this podcast. Yeah.
Well, it's like you and the children thing. You don't have children, but people ask you child rearing questions. So
yeah, because my advice is so good.
Yeah. So, well, maybe mine is just do the opposite of what James says, and you'll be successful. That actually says a lot, really. But anyway, in this particular instance, like the last time I proposed, I actually I really cared. I really which isn't to say I didn't care before, but like I did care. I was listening to what she wanted. I set it up in a way that kind of surprised her, but didn't. Like, it worked. You got to know your audience. You got to know who you're dealing with. This is just bad overall.
Yeah.
No. Just no. Like a sexy orange asks, for Arif, how confident would you be that you could fix the defensive scheme if you were hired to replace Donatel? And for James's self-reflection corner, what's your worst habit? As an example, mine is believing in myself.
I'm a very arrogant person. I don't think that surprises anybody, but no way do I think I'm confident enough to fix the defensive scheme of an NFL defense with zero coaching experience. Absolutely not. Now, if you ask, like, if we grabbed, Coach Vass from Twitter or the Make Defense Great Again podcast, Deontay Lear with The Athletic or Ted Wynn at The Athletic, who've all coached and in particular have coached defense, I would have some level of confidence they'd be able to actually figure that out. They would probably want a fair amount of feedback from the players and work something out collaboratively. But yeah, I think that they might be able to do it. But no, I could not myself do anything. Now, if I was brought in as a consultant, do I think I could maybe help the team? Yeah, but not without asking a bunch of questions first, right? Like, I think that there is something, the only reason I feel like I've got something worth saying and having a platform is because I think about things in a way that at least makes talking about football fun and interesting and hopefully intelligent. And maybe some of those things could be used to help inform people learn about football. And hopefully, if that's the case, maybe I'd be able to help out a thing here or there if I was brought in as a consultant. I'm not saying the Vikings should do that. If they're going to hire a consultant, there are literally thousands of names ahead of me that they should hire. But, I think that it'd be fun to be able to ask some questions and maybe in asking some of those questions to be able to help out. But no, I don't think that I'd be able to replace an NFL defensive coordinator without any coaching experience. No.
And now for James's self-reflection corner.
Boy.
When I'm put into an interview, when I have a job interview and they ask what's my greatest weakness, the answer I tend to give in that spot is I don't know when to stop what I'm doing. Like working on a project, sometimes it's hard to figure out when I'm done. Like I do that, but lately it's just been motivation. I think motivation due to outside factors is my biggest probably biggest problem as far as worst habit is concerned. Yeah, if I go any further, we're gonna go real self-reflection and talk about.
Yeah, we don't want that. We want like existential, deep philosophical self-reflection, not like personal failure self-reflection.
Yeah, if we're gonna go through personal failures, oh God.
Oh jeez.
Let's quickly end this with the last question. R. Menson asks, oh, it's for me too. For James's Aaron Rodgers medical advice and parenting crossover corner. My kid got sent home from daycare today suspected of having pink eye. How would Aaron Rodgers suggest that he be treated? And how do you endorse that? And would you endorse that course of treatment?
All right. So James has an answer, I'm sure, but I do want to jump in and say, when I saw this, and this is because my brain is broken. Let me be clear that I fully recognize this and encourage you to join the Discord server where you can post in the channel Online Brain. Because I imagine people who post in that channel also maybe are get where I come from, at least on this one. So Gwyneth Paltrow has...
Oh, God.
Okay, first of all, you see why I went there, right? So
Yes.
Gwyneth Paltrow has a company and I believe Netflix show called Goop. It is for holistic treatment. They talk about stuff like, I believe it's called Reiki massage, which is massage where they don't touch you. If you're super into energy, and this is a podcast that believes in vibes, so I guess this is a little bit of a contradiction. Great. They manipulate your chi and you feel better, allegedly. I'm sorry I'm speaking with a lot of disdain, but I think people get hurt by bad medical advice, and so I'm going to be disdainful. Here is some Gwyneth Paltrow bad medical advice that this immediately reminded me of. Gwyneth Paltrow believes that in order to, quote-unquote, rebalance female hormones and to have a super clean, this is actually probably okay for iTunes if I word this correctly, uterus, you should steam it with a product called Mugwort V-Steam. You sit on what is essentially a mini... Now I'm quoting her. You sit on what is essentially a mini throne, and a combination of steam, infrared, and mugwort cleanses your uterus et al. The et al. Is literally in the quote. This was initially reported uncritically by Harper's Bazaar, which don't do that. I shouldn't say any, because you can find cranks in any field that are credentialed, but the vast majority of OBGYNs and reproductive health experts would say, don't do that. That's bad and can cause infections. And don't do that. Already the idea of a lot of cleaning products for that area are questionable and don't really have a good understanding of how the body works. This one in particular is very bad. It is an aromatic, so mugwort is an aromatic herb. It's used as food flavoring and in some cases as holistic medicine. But your body has a body temperature for a reason. That's a good idea. The body is generally self-regulating, and when it's not, there are medical practices to kind of deal with that. So I just want to say that this is a bad idea, and also that Aaron Rodgers' kid would have his eye over the Mugwort V-Steam in order for the pink eye to be cleansed by Mugwort steam.
How can I even begin to follow up on that? That's the end of the show. That's it. we're gonna wrap here. Are you ready to plug your work after that explanation? Because that's what you're doing. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I am blessed by the people at ProFootballNetwork.com to be able to talk about a wider variety of subjects than I normally would when covering, was it football? Oh, wow. Okay. Football. So you can find my work covering football over at ProFootballNetwork.com/author/ahassan. Obviously, we have a bunch of great work over at the website. Dalton Robinson does some really great film breakdowns. Aaron Wilson does a really great job breaking stories and providing context for breaking stories. And we're launching College Football Network soon, which technically I shouldn't be saying, but I don't think they mind that I've said that. We're launching that in the next couple of days. And so we've got a great college team that I work with to produce draft content with. It's a ton of fun. And also they let me talk about a bunch of weird stuff all the time. I devoted in this week's column, which covers kind of the thoughts that I had during this week's games, I devoted like several paragraphs to holders, for kicks. And I don't mean for fun for kicks. I mean for field goal kicks.
I was about to accuse you of a pun, and we're still there.
That's that time it literally was unintentional, but we'll keep it in. I wrote about two games individually. I talked about the Packers Giants game. I talked about the Cowboys Rams game and what that means for both teams. And I talked about that week's understandings. I have quarterback tiers. I believe the quarterback tiers are the most popular thing I write every week. It's also the one that I don't like writing all that much, but it is fun to write about a particular quarterback every week. And just random columns. I talked about, why offenses are struggling, or what the historical connection between the Vikings and the Vikings is. Again, one of the pieces I'm most proud of, so I'm going to keep plugging it until it doesn't make any sense too. Or just like whatever. So you head over to profootballnetwork.com. I've also got, obviously, besides this podcast, the Minnesota Football Party, which you can find with Locked On Minnesota Sports.
So that'll be it for this episode of Norse Code. We will be back later this week to look at the match against the Dolphins. Hopefully there'll be a decision as to what's happening at quarterback there, so we'll have that to look forward to. But for right now, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN, or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.
Gwyneth Paltrow, really?
The first thing I thought of, okay? That's not my fault. That's just how my brain works.
It's society. I get it. It's society's fault.
Okay. I'm glad you understand.
Just ridiculous. Like, as soon as you said it, it's like, oh my God, you know what? If I had a piece of paper with my answer on it, I would have just tossed it up. Like, nope. We're done. There's nothing more to say here. We're out. Gwyneth Paltrow. Really?